Thank you for listening to The Scene. And thanks to our sponsors, Elite Feeds in Tyndall, South Dakota, Reno Construction, Chris Hay Grinding, Tyndall Motors, Frank's Trading Post, and Team Pluto. These fine businesses have sponsored Hot Dog Night in Tyndall, South Dakota, June 7th. We're so happy to have the support of our community and the small businesses inside of it. Thank you for being part of The Scene. Welcome back to another exciting episode of The Scene. With me today is Sara Pette. Sara founded OUTTA WAX, I'm sure with partners, back in 2020. They're a vinyl record manufacturer. Welcome to The Scene, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me, Bubba.
I am so intrigued. So before we get too deep into all the things that are happening right now, because I know it's a very exciting time for you, let's get the backstory, and why don't we kind of start in 2020?
Sure. So yeah, in 2020, the pandemic hit, and I had a business at the time, which was dog walking and pet care. And as you can imagine, that did not last very long.
Everybody could walk their own dogs all of a sudden.
Exactly. Everyone's home. Culturally, I'm happy that shift happened, but ultimately it tanked my business. So, but anyway, I freaked out, had no money, had no job. And I started thinking about what if we could do this vinyl record pressing company. I think I was empowered by I successfully got like an EIDL loan for my prior business. And I was just feeling really like, hey, if I can get funding for this, maybe I can get funding for a record pressing company. So yeah, I asked my brother, John, with whom I'm very close, and he is a very intense record collector and is actually a big part of that community. But yeah, so I asked him if he wanted to do this with me, and he said he'd always wanted to do something like this. So we set off on our journey. In 2020, it was a lot of research and just trying to figure out where to source, manufacturing equipment, which we've never done that before. Neither of us have that background. And then in 2021, as we were starting to ramp up a little bit more, I got to go train at a plant called formerly Sunpress. Now it's called New Press. But it's in Miami, Florida. So I lived there for about 6 weeks.
Can we pause right there?
Sure.
Can we pause right there? Okay, so we made it to Florida, just so we remember. But
okay, Florida.
I want to go back a little bit. So brother's a big record collector, so that's kind of where the love of records starts. You guys have that at home, just listening to records and being purveyors of that culture?
Absolutely. So John, definitely, he's about 11 years my senior, so I looked up to him quite a bit. And
you guys are different generations. 11 years is a big gap.
Exactly. He's Gen X and I'm a millennial, and it really shows. But it actually helps us quite a bit in our business, because we see things from like a different standpoint.
Well, I was taught. So we have a lot of younger people on the episode, and just to kind of go off on a little tangent here. So I talk to a lot of kids that are 10 years younger than me, and those are kind of the older crap. I've talked to some kids that are 20 years younger than me now. And they're young people, right? They're teens and in their early 20s, young men and ladies in the music business mostly. But the world that they're growing up in is so much different than, I was born in 86, just recently had a birthday, turned 38. So the
Happy
world
birthday.
I came from, thank you. The world that I came from, I had a Game Boy growing up, but they were lame enough and the batteries died. So you didn't stay on them all the time, right? And even then it was a preach, get outside. And I feel like we still really grew up outside. My brothers, less so. My brothers are still addicted to video games in their mid 30s, right? And then you have a generation past them, like my son, who's 12, who's spent his entire life not knowing anything beyond having the internet and the screens and the everything, right? So a huge shift in the human experience in the last 50 years. And it's just so wild to think about that and how we're kind of the last ones hanging on to that, like the natural world pre-internet. We're the only ones left with a memory of that as far as young people go. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild. keep coming back to this thought of our specific generation. I'm right around your age. I'm about to turn 37. And I remember, not having the computer, not having the internet. And I've heard and read that, millennials specifically have, have both feet in, like, we've experienced the analog stuff, sort of the not using the internet for every bit of knowledge we need, or downloading, streaming, that kind of thing. Yeah. And then as we got older in our teen years, we really just went full scale with the digital stuff. Like, it was so new and cool, and I loved Napster. It was so awesome.
Right. Well, and I had cassette tapes, right? I had cassette tapes were some of my first birthday gifts from my auntie, man. Paradise City. Get out of here, awesome. Man. Oh, yeah, man. I got surrounded by great music, right? And mom had a big tape collection, and then CDs, right? Never a big, I think they had vinyl around. I was a little too young, and I think it got ruined in a basement flood. It ruined all the records, right? As many of them have done. So, right, we've lost a lot of these, and what it really is it's an archive. It is a hard drive of all of this music, right? So even if you only get one printed, to me, that's worth something, because that's still an analog version. Put a needle on it. The simple technology of a record, to me, kind of baffles me, right?
Absolutely.
So we're getting to your internship. Can we kind of get into the schooling now behind like how a record is made from the actual manufacturing side, right? We've seen the behind the music. Now let's see the behind the vinyl.
Absolutely. So great question / request. So there are a lot of steps into making a vinyl record. Sometimes when people see pricing at vinyl record manufacturing facilities, they don't fully understand the price, because the work that goes into it, there's always like a base price, because you need lacquers and stampers, and that is the sort of like the prerequisite for being able to attach stampers onto the molds of the machine and press. So the first part is getting a lacquer cut. So lacquer is it is a lacquer, and it is shaped like a record, and it has I'm not sure there's the metal in there, but it has like a plate inside of it that keeps it a little firmer. But yeah, lacquer is easily cut into. So what happens is a cutting engineer uses a lathe, which cuts grooves into the lacquer. And it's basically sound waves. So the needle, when you drop it on the record, is reading sound waves.
That is freaking amazing. Can we just pause there?
Bonkers.
Dude,
bonkers.
Can we just stop there and go, what? It's what? That's literally just
still, oh, go ahead.
Dude, no, you go. My mind is blown. I don't get it. How are we not in awe of that? Like,
it's really amazing. And people don't know that it is sound waves. So people don't usually know like what the stylus is actually reading. And it's like,
all you're doing is amplifying that signal. A record player is just amplifying what's that. Like, that is there. Without any amplification, you can put your ear next to that record and hear it. I don't know that people know that anymore, right? Because now we're stepping into, none of these kids grew up with records. They didn't even grow up with CDs. Right? My wife is going to be 28, right? In July. Mm-hmm. She's 10 years my senior. The world she grew up in was totally different. None of that physical stuff was even a thing. It was all online, right? So you're digging into this lost art, and you have learned it and taken your love and passion for records, said, hey, they gave me money for this crazy idea of walking dogs. Maybe they'll give me some money for this. And that's essentially what paid for your school to kind of get out there and take a chance on learning it from the ground. That is amazing. Thank you. Thank you. This is a dying art, and that's why I was so adamant about getting you on the podcast. And I'm so passionate about talking to people like you. Inspire me, for me to be able to have you call in and be on my silly podcast. It means the world, because I am so intrigued by this. So needles, reading sound waves. This is how it's done, right?
So beyond lacquer, so you manufacture the lacquer, so that gets done by a cutting engineer, and then this is also bonkers. It gets sent to a galvanics facility where they use electroplating to basically make a mirror image of the grooves on the lacquer. So that is made into what's called stampers. The stampers are, I believe they're nickel, and they, like I said, they have the inverse of the grooves. So that's what gets attached to the molds that we have in the record press. And then that's what smushes the plastic into.
That's what presses into the. Do you have to warm the vinyl when you do that? Is it a warm process just by nature, right? And then you let that cool, and that is the essence of it. So you're stamping sound waves onto a vinyl piece in the form of a circle. And it's in like, that's just wild.
Bonkers.
Yeah, like I just, you don't have to be a fan. Just be a fan of science. Be a fan of freaking science, and that is cool. Yeah. I'm sorry I'm going off on that, but I just wild. I've never had anyone break it down for me. I've watched the kind of how it's made on Discovery, where they went through it in like 3 minutes, and I was like, whoa. I feel like we could have gotten a little bit more here, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
So you're down in Florida. It was a 6-week course, correct? You kind of get thrown into the fire, because that's probably the only way to really learn this stuff anyway. You got to be able to see the whole process. Can you talk about, leaving home for a 6-week intensive course? I mean, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. So I have some friends who do a lot of solo traveling, and I've always sort of had, I sort of covet that lifestyle a little bit. And I have, when I travel, I usually am like with my husband or with a friend or with my bandmates. We'll go on tour or something like that. So solo traveling and doing this thing by myself was really empowering, on top of starting a factory. So it was awesome. And I loved living in Miami. It was like really beautiful. I wasn't there for like the mega heat. Like I was there until like early May. So that's good. I don't do well in the heat. So I got thrown into the gauntlet of record pressing. They basically put me on a machine like on the Wednesday of the week I started. And they were like, all right, you have to watch this machine and let me know if anything gets screwed up. And with record pressing, it's actually, as you can imagine, it's a very like specific process. Like every part of it needs to be correctly done, because you want that record to look and sound good. So my experience was a lot of babysitting this legacy machine, or I would work on different machines on different days. But they're all legacy machines, which means they're the old ones that are from the 50s and 60s that people have like Frankenstein together over the years. So the machines I was learning on were technically automatic, but the automation process of an old machine sometimes fails. So you basically have to pull like bad records out of this machine that has very hot stampers on there. So it's a lot of like pulling plastic out of this machine. Whereas our machines are going to be a lot easier to use. And as I was saying before, it was sort of like I like trained with a harder. You
got a history. You got a history lesson. Exactly. Hey, this is what it used to be, and now coming to the 21st century, right? We're like, oh yeah, this is way easier. Okay, yeah. Hey, this actually looks like a viable business, because I went to school and that looked like it sucked.
Yeah.
like I love a good record as much as the next gal, but I think I'm good. So how exciting. So, and now even just so you get through school, and now this is what, 2021, you still going to school, or have we moved into 2022?
Yeah. So 2021, I can't remember if I already said this, but our business partner, Alex, joined us in the ownership. So it's myself, my brother, John, and Alex, our friend. And we really ramped up. We got funding that we desperately needed, because
that helps.
It's a business to start up. It's actually, we thought it was this much money, not 3 times that amount of money,
Of course.
For anyone who's looking to get into record pressing, just know it's quite an investment. So which is scary, of course, because we still want to be, operational and survive and be a viable business.
Right. And just because I'm an entrepreneur myself and just a little bit interested in kind of cost and benefit, is most of that, I mean, I would assume in the buying of the machines themselves. Are the day-to-day operating cost of like the materials, is the vinyl expensive?
Arguably no. You sort of, if you're talking about just one vinyl record, let's say it's a 12-inch vinyl record, the PVC itself probably costs $2 to $3 itself, but then there's all these other things, like you need to add labels, you need to add inner sleeves,
there's all
and
the
jackets,
other, all the other costs associated with it, which I think people understand now, that when you're buying a record, you're buying a quality piece, and as such, and because you're not doing it like trying to do it at scale, it already is a boutique item. And that's kind of the benefit of your company, right? Is that you're able to do smaller scale projects for independent artists. Is that kind of the business model?
Definitely. As a musician and DJ, and of course, record collector, I really thought it was important to offer very short runs. Part of the reason that some companies don't offer short runs is because the unit price is so expensive because of the process I was explaining before.
The cutting,
the lacquers and stampers.
Right.
So
that to make that
cost.
It costs the same to everybody, no matter how long the run is. That cost is always attached to it. And I think that's also something that by explaining the process now, people might understand a little bit better. Like, hey, the huge process is in making the stamp, not in making the vinyl record. Everybody knows vinyl's not that expensive. You know what I mean? I mean, everything's expensive now. Even just saying $2-3 for a record to people who were in the record industry in the 50s and 60s would probably faint if they weren't already dead.
Definitely, yeah.
So yeah,
even in the early 90s, like my brother and I were talking about, the cost of ordering records. Like, let's say you wanted to make a record in the early 90s, like you could get, it was very, very cheap, partly because there wasn't that much demand. So, the pressing companies were sort of taking what they could get, and they kept their prices pretty low. And PVC didn't cost as much then either. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, and nobody wants to, pay more for luxury items, right? When you start paying more for the necessities, the last thing you want to do is start paying more on top of the few luxuries that you might have in life. And what that usually does is chokes out the small businesses, because most of us are in the luxury item business. So, kudos to you for just attempting it. You guys are bonkers, to use your words.
Thank you.
But I really appreciate it. You guys are getting ready to hit it full bore now. You have an exciting month coming up in June. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So we, over the 4 years we've been doing this, we're always perpetually 4 months away. So we are less than that now. We're trying to finish it on June 10th. And it's looking pretty good. We still have a lot of work to do, but that's our date that we're trying to start pressing records. When you get up and running as a vinyl manufacturer, you can't really press records on the first day. That's just like too good to be true kind of thing. But hopefully by the end of that week, we'll be actually pressing. Which is really exciting. Our first press is going to be a record that I really love. I could talk a little bit more about that, but it's by a band called Cortez the Killer.
Oh my God, I already love it. Love that song.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they're a local sort of cult favorite from 2008, 2009. Some of the people in that band are actually my bandmates now. But they made this amazing record that's sort of legendary in the DIY punk community. And it never made it to vinyl. So I'm trying to do that. And yeah, it's cool because, now I have also inherited a record label. And that said record label is putting out that record. So it's sort of cool. It's like vertical integration. Like I can take costs for the records I put out that I'm pressing myself.
No doubt.
So
no doubt.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny that you say that, because that's kind of how we're building the podcast now, because we also host open mic nights and have a passion for booking our friends and songwriter nights. And we have our own band and we're doing all these things. And it's like these venues out here are all kind of putting themselves at a loss to host live music because we don't have the population to support as many awesome live music venues that we have. A lot of them are maybe taking too many chances and as such are ready to stop taking chances at all. So we're trying to be like, hey, why don't we just work it out where you don't pay 1-for-1 for a show? It's not me paying Sara for a record anymore. It's, hey, Sara, I'm going to promote that record for free and we're not going to exchange any money. And then if it's worth something to you, you can advertise with us later. Right? And give us that space. And let me see what we can do getting other people's name on that record. Now replace record with stage, right? And starting to find that support because it's out there. It's just that small business owners are too busy trying to run their businesses and probably can't afford to hire a marketing manager and pay them $75,000 to $80,000 a year, right? Like, so we're kind of stepping in between that role. And we have the podcast that hosts the people's music, plus the interviews that get to know the artist before you see them on the stages that we're promoting through. Like, the synergy of the whole thing is just, it keeps them in a nice tight circle. Once you're in the scene, you're in, right? And when you find out we have a much larger swath, we'd kind to introduce you to cool people like Sara, who has a record pressing company, right? And then we can connect Sara with our friends at the Midwest Country Music Organization, which is nothing but a group of independent musical acts, right? Like from every size, that every single one of them at some point has probably considered, oh man, I would love to have this pressed on vinyl. The problem is the large companies right now are booked out years, some of them, to print anything for a small person, right? A small band, small act, small run, don't do it. Or they won't do it at all, right? So
Correct.
Let's cover two heads with one stone here, right? Okay, how small of a run do you do? And how far out are, you know, if someone commissioned today, obviously we know the June 10th date, how soon after June 10th could they expect a record?
Yeah, so we already have orders, which is great because we need things to press once we, you know, do that first press of Cortez the Killer. So yeah, to answer your first question, we are doing runs as small as 100, which is of high interest to people. Unfortunately, due to, you know, the lacquer and stamper manufacturing, that price per unit is quite high, but people are still willing to pay that amount because they know they can turn it around for, you know, for 20, 25, even 30, $40 for their record on their merch table. But we also do it because other pressing plants don't really do that because of that unit price being so high. And it's sort of, in a manufacturing standpoint, it's sort of annoying to set up each job. Like you have to apply the stampers to the molds. Sometimes you have to change the molds out for a different size. So yeah, some plants just don't want to do it because it's, you know, it's sort of annoying and painful. Once you set up the project, you sort of want to, you know, press as many records as you can.
Press as many as you, exactly. Now, are you able to save the stamp afterwards?
Yes.
So you can repress a repress, that would be?
You can, yeah. Unfortunately, stampers don't last forever, and they're actually, they're easy to damage. Like if you accidentally drop a screwdriver on one, it's
right.
ruined,
It's gonna, yeah, it's done. It's a very soft metal, very soft metal.
Yes, and they say that each set of stampers would probably easily press 500, maybe 1,000. So yeah, you can use one set of stampers. Sometimes, you know, they get worn out from pressing. So sometimes you want to get a few sets of stampers depending on how big your job is. But to answer your question, you can have old stampers and put them on a machine and start pressing. With the note that not all stampers fit every machine. We're gonna do a little R&D around that to see if we can like take stampers that was designed for like a legacy machine and put it on our new machines. Like we have a contraption that can maybe do that. So that people can come to us with their old stampers and, you know, create a new run.
Yeah. Are there archives of those stamps?
At the pressing plant that I worked at Sun Press, they just kept them on hand just in case anyone wanted a repress.
Right.
There's probably, I'd love to know what other plants do, especially bigger plants.
Oh my goodness. Can you imagine what is in those places?
I know.
Oh,
and I bet they
goodness.
go on eBay for a lot or whatever.
Oh, no way. The archive of it. Well, and that's what I'm considering. It's a different thing. It doesn't matter what they charge at a show. For me, it's almost invaluable, right? Like, that's for the biggest fans anyway. It's not the way I'm delivering my music. Go get my music for free. You want to listen to it once or twice, go on Spotify, dude. I don't care. But if you want to go deep and you want to know every little thing about every song on here and you want to fall in love with this music, you want it to change your life like music used to back in the 60s and 70s, that's how you're doing it. So what you're doing is just, I'm blown away. I love every bit. I love every bit of it. We're definitely going to encourage everyone to follow you. You're really awesome on Instagram. You're kind of explaining your whole story there as well. That's why I kind of just felt like giving you the platform here to just tell the story and let everyone know, hey, we're open for business. Let's get them going. OUTTAWAX.com. It's OUTTAWAX.com. You guys, send them in. A lot of our listeners obviously are musicians themselves and have records that are out there. And now, can you take from digital? Like, I have digital copies of songs, and you can send those in and get the stamps cut?
Yeah, essentially. There is, you could do that. I would say it's prudent to have the audio mastered for vinyl. So there's, I don't know the ins and outs of this, but there are certain frequencies that you want more in vinyl than on the digital
So a remastering process for you musicians listening, understand that you're going to have to go through some kind of remastering process with your mastering engineers, and to say, hey, I want this mastered for vinyl. You may have that in your deliverables already, but little tips. We always like to share as much knowledge as we can on the show, realizing that we ourselves are an archive as well of knowledge and a receptacle of that, right?
Absolutely. And I encourage, if your listeners are interested in this process and sort of just want to ask questions, you're welcome to email me at hello@outawax.com. And on the website, there's a link to that as well. But yeah, I love talking about it. So again, if anyone has any questions about the nitty gritty, I'm happy to share.
Yeah, I kind of told you it was a 20-minute podcast and I've kept you over 25 now. I feel bad, but I just get so into the science of it. You're the first person who's ever taken the time to really explain it. And it was just, thank you so much for that. I think it's great content.
Of course. Thank you so much for being interested. I'm glad I can be a voice for the industry. I think everyone in the industry also thinks it's really cool, and that's why we all got into it, right? So
yeah, it's a labor of love. It's a labor of love for sure. You didn't get in it to make money, right? But we hope that you can. We will be driving all of our friends your way. We like I said, every single person that we've interviewed on the show so far, everyone that we will interview in the future will all have an interest in it. And we're gonna send every one of them your way. So, Sara, thank you so much for joining the show. This was great.
Thank you, Bubba. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's really fun talking to you.
It was my pleasure. And for everybody else, thanks for making yourself part of the scene. Thank you for listening. Remember to go to patreon.com/thescenesd. Follow us on all your social media channels and make yourself part of the scene.